board. So kia koutou, thank you very much for those of you who are joining us this evening, and thank you to those who are going to be watching the recording. Thank you very much for taking the time. My name's Donna Tetchens, and I'm part of the reference team here at the Wellington Medical and Health Sciences Library. And I'm joined by my colleagues, Anna, Mary and Mel. And as part of as reference librarians here, a big part of our role is teaching information skills and research skills, which includes referencing and responding to students' inquiries. And I have to say that referencing is probably one of the most common queries that we get asked about. Before I start the presentation, I really want to acknowledge Eileen McKinley. Eileen is Associate Professor and Senior Lecturer at the Primary Healthcare and General Practice Department. She's now Director of the university's interprofessional program, although she still does a little bit of teaching. She was the director of the postgraduate program at Primary Healthcare and General Practice, and she really started teaching referencing within the program. And some time ago, I started co-teaching this presentation with her. But a lot of this presentation is Eileen's as much as mine. So in terms of today's session, you'll be hearing from the convener's perspective, as well as my perspective in terms of experience in teaching referencing and responding to referencing queries. In terms of this evening's session, if you want to ask questions or make any comments, feel free to do so in chat. Anna's going to be kind of monitoring that throughout the evening. So just learning outcomes for today's session. So identify why, when and what to reference, recognise the differences between APA and Vancouver, know how to place in-text citations in the text of your assignments, know what some of the key elements that need to be included in a reference, and know some of the common referencing issues conveners have highlighted and how to resolve them. So there's a lot to get through. But what I'm emphasising in terms of today, in terms of this evening's session, is you don't need to know the ins and outs of referencing. You'll be really relieved to know. You just need to know the basic principles and have access to a good referencing guide. The one that I really like and refer postgrad students to is the University of Queensland, who have really comprehensive referencing guides. They have one for APA 7th, and they also have one for Vancouver. And so you can just Google University of Queensland APA 7th, or Vancouver. We also have links to them from our library website under our guides. But really, there's lots of referencing guides around. So it's just a case of just finding one that you feel comfortable using. So just back to basics. So why do we need to reference? So academic writing is about using evidence to back up your claims. So referencing shows your work has a substantial and factual basis. It lends authority to the points you make, and it credits authors and acknowledges their ideas, which is really important. And it shows the person marking your assignment the work you've done to reach your conclusions. Because at postgraduate level, they really are expecting you to have read widely. It also allows readers to find references because they may be interested in doing some further reading. And really importantly, adequate referencing ensures that you're protected against academic misconduct and plagiarism. So what needs to be referenced? So basically, anytime you cite information that comes from another source and is not just general knowledge or common knowledge, as it's called. So you must cite a reference when you're using other people's ideas, thoughts, or models, even if you're putting those ideas in your own words. Any issues, commentary, discussions, statistics, images, tables, direct quotations, paraphrasing, which is putting things in your own words. You need to cite that information. When we talk about referencing and when we're talking about citing, it's basically the same thing. When we talk about referencing, people often think of a reference list at the end of an assignment or at the end of a journal article. But actually, really importantly, there's two aspects to referencing. There's the in-text citation, which is in the body of your assignment. So every time you use someone's work, you need to insert an in-text citation. And then there's a reference list which appears at the end of your assignment. So the person marking your assignment should see the in-text citation and then find the corresponding reference in the reference list. Because what markers say is that often they'll get a reference list but no in-text citations. So really importantly, there's two parts to this. And when we talk about a referencing style, what we're talking about is the information necessary for an in-text citation in the reference and the reference list. So the style is how the elements are ordered, the punctuation and other formatting such as italics is very important. There are many, many different styles of referencing. Most postgraduate programs at UOW require you to either use a numbered style, which is Vancouver, and I know primary healthcare and general practice are using JAMA in most of their papers. JAMA is actually just a variation of Vancouver, or you're using APA 7th, which is an author date style. And so this is an example of APA 7th, basically. So you can see here we've got the in-text citation. And so the in-text citation consists of the author's surname, comma, date. And so what should happen is that the person marking your assignment should be able to then go to your reference list, which for APA is organised in alphabetical order according to surname, and then find that reference in the reference list. And the reference should then contain the information needed for them to go and find that particular, in this case, it's a journal article. And this is what Vancouver looks like. So Vancouver, the in-text citations are numbers. And then, so for example, if we look here, we've got the number 2. And so what that means is that the reference list is ordered in numerical order, and then the person marking your assignment can go to reference 2 and see the full reference there. Just a note about reference list versus bibliography. This is used interchangeably, but the reference list is the references that you have cited in your work. A reference list should only contain references that you've actually cited. A bibliography is the list of references that are cited, as well as background reading that you have used but not cited. So if you've done some background reading, but you haven't actually used it in your assignment, you don't need to cite that background readings, because most assignments at postgraduate level require reference lists. Just going to talk briefly about academic integrity, because this is something that the university it's very, very important. So referencing well is acknowledging other people's work, and that's a really key part of academic integrity. If you don't reference, then that is considered plagiarism, even if it is unintentional. So plagiarism, just to be really clear, is not acknowledging when you've used someone else's ideas, not referencing direct quotations, copying parts of a work without acknowledging the source. That can be a text, image, statistics, using work or part of a work that you've already submitted. And often for many students, it's unintentional. And I'm not going to read all of this, but this is from the University of Otago's plagiarism website. And if you look at unintentional plagiarism, it's basically just not having the skills to do referencing well, and often working in a sort of very stressed state, not having good note-taking practices, just poor study practices in general. And so that can lead to what we call unintentional plagiarism. The way to avoid it is to take notes, and really importantly, record where you got your information from. Use quotation marks for direct quotations because this is a really common error for students. Many of you will be using what we would call Turnitin, which is the university's anti-plagiarism software, and often that will pick up on the fact that you haven't put direct quotation marks around direct quotes. And again, when you're paraphrasing, putting information into your own words, always cite your source. So just a little section about in-text citations. So for APA 7th, which is author date style, this is the example here. So it's surname, comma, year. So you don't add author initials or author first names. For a lot of web resources like websites and reports, it'll be the organization behind it will be the organizational author. So it's Ministry of Health, comma, year. The number of authors dictates how many to include in the in-text citation. You don't need to know this detail, by the way, because all the guides will tell you, but basically up to 2 authors, and they are listed according to surname in the in-text citation. 3 or more, and it becomes et al. If you want to merge citations because you've used the information from a number of references, then you can do it by you put the merged citations in the one bracket and just separate the citations with the semicolon just there. As a rule, the in-text citation for APA becomes part of the sentence. So the full stop comes after the in-text citation. And just a note about the Vancouver in-text citation. So just the number, so the number can be in as in brackets. It can be in round brackets or square brackets, or you can do what's called superscript, basically. So a number is allocated to a source in the order in which it's first cited in the text. Now, really, really importantly, because this again is something students get a bit mixed up with, if that source is then referred to again, the same reference number is reused. So if you refer to the source more than once, you don't allocate it a different number, you just reuse the same number. In terms of punctuation, the Vancouver or numbered in-text citation appears after the full stop if you're putting it at the end of a sentence. And if you're wanting to merge citations like that, you can just use commas and then they go within the same bracket. If they're consecutive numbers, then you just put a dash between them. So as I said at the start, you don't need to know the ins and outs of every detail about referencing. You need to know that you need to have access to a good guide, but you do need to kind of understand the steps. So the first thing is work out what it is you're citing. Is it a journal article? Is it a book? Is it a report, website, YouTube video? And then just start to kind of gather together the elements that you need, record those elements, and then consult a guide for an example to follow. And just note things like punctuation. In terms of consulting the guide, punctuation, italics, capitalization, number of authors are really important. I'm going to talk now about referencing journal articles because probably this is the most common referencing type that you're going to be using. Sorry, I'll just get rid of this reminder just here. So when you start referencing for the first time, you often see all of this information appearing. With practice, you just get used to looking to see what the kind of key elements are. So this is a journal article, and we've got a number of elements that we need to include in our reference for our reference list. So we've got the article title here, we've got the authors here, and down below here, which you possibly can't see, we've got the journal article, the year, the volume sometimes you'll get two numbers. The first number will be the volume followed by the issue number and the page numbers. The volume tells us how many, how long the journal's been around, because generally it'll get a new volume for each year. So this one's been around for a long time. We're up to volume 78. And then we've got up here the DOI. The DOI is a unique number, and it's actually important when it comes to referencing. It's digital object identifier, usually given to scholarly journal articles, and you'll usually find it at the top or sometimes down the side of the first page. So really important. So all you need to do is, so this is the APA 7th referencing guide from the University of Queensland. And I should have said APA stands for American Psychological Association. It's been around for a really long time, and we're now on the 7th edition. So if you're consulting a guide, make sure it's the 7th edition. Now we've got, I think it was 5 authors. So we can tell here, it says, so this is what needs to be included in a journal article, 3 to 20 authors. It tells us the key elements in the order that it needs to appear in the reference list. It tells us what an in-text citation looks like for 3 to 20 authors. So we put the first author's surname and then at al, followed by the year. And then this is how it should appear in the reference list. See how the authors are surname, comma, initials, followed by the year. That's the title of the article. It tells you the elements at the top here, as I said, and that's the journal followed by the volume, page numbers. And this is where the DOI appears at the end. And so that previous example of a journal article, this is what it looks like here. So I've got this is my assignment, and I've put my in-text citation here. And this is the reference just here. Just note that with APA, titles are italicized, and it will depend on the reference type that you're using. So for example, for journal, it's the journal title that's italicized. And also note that the journal is spelt out in full. And generally, well, what should happen is that the journal, the first letter of each word, apart from stop words, is capitalized. And then we've got the volume, that's the issue there, followed by the page numbers and the DOI. And this is the same thing with Vancouver. So you follow the same process, just look up a guide. Just note, that Vancouver, so nothing is italicized, and the journal title is abbreviated. And I'll come back to where you go to find the abbreviations. And this is an example just here. And so I've got my in-text citation, and these are the key elements for that particular reference. And I've got the DOI just there. So the Vancouver journal titles are abbreviated according to what's called the National Library of Medicine catalogue. You can just Google NLM catalogue, that's the URL just there, and then you can look the titles up. What journal titles that are just one word aren't abbreviated. And that's what the NLM catalogue just looks like. So I've got developmental psychology. If this was APA, it would be spelt out in full, but I don't know, but that's the abbreviation just there. So that's what I would need to use for my in my reference list. I'm just going to move on to just about referencing web resources. Again, these are web resources are often things that people struggle with, but actually you do get used to kind of getting the kind of key elements. Here we've got the URL, we've got the organizational author, the title, we've got page last updated, which in this instance is at the bottom. Sometimes you don't always get a date, and I'll talk about that shortly. So this is the example just here. Just a note about when you've got te reo and English names. So you've got a couple of options. You can actually cite both, and this is the way that you would do it. You can cite the te reo name or you can cite the English name. Just note, and this is for APA, if you're going to put, say, the te reo name and on its own in the in-text citation, which is absolutely fine, then that should be mirrored in your reference list. Sorry, in the reference in your reference list. And this is the example for Vancouver. Now, I'm just going to go back. So you'll see, because APA 7th, they did quite a lot of work to streamline the referencing of online resources. And I should have said, when I talk about online resources, this can be websites, it can be online reports, anything like that. Note that with APA, it's the title that gets italicized this time. With Vancouver, Vancouver's been around for a really long time, but they haven't really updated it. So in some ways, there are some, I have to be honest, some quite old-fashioned elements here, but this is what it tells us that it wants. So after the title, we've got in square brackets, internet. Then we've got the place of publication and the publisher, which in this case is the Ministry of Health, followed by the year. And then in square brackets, we've got when we actually cited it. So when we used that particular resource, in this case, it's March the 6th, 2024, but we used that particular order. Then we say available from, and then we list the URL. So the Vancouver referencing does have additional elements compared to APA. With APA, you don't need to put, if I just go back here, you'll see that there's no cited. You only need to put cited with APA if the information is going to change really, really rapidly. Just a note about citing web resources. We've talked about the fact that the author is often the organisation that produced the resource. Often there's not a date on a website. So if that's the case, APA, you replace the date with n.d. Like this is the example for an in-text citation here. For Vancouver referencing, you put date on unknown in square brackets. Just a note about abbreviating organisational names. So for APA 7th in-text citation, the first time you cite an organisational name, it should be spelt out in full. And then you, after that, you can abbreviate it in subsequent in-text citations. Just a note, the abbreviation should be familiar and make sense. One thing I say to students is you have to remember that your markers are sometimes marking 30 assignments. And so you don't want to make it hard for them. They don't want to look at an abbreviation and think, well, what is that? And then have to go back and try and find the full name. Te reo names should definitely not be abbreviated. And really importantly for both APA and Vancouver or JAMA, organisational names should be spelt out in full in the reference list and should not be abbreviated. Just a note about quotations, and this actually came from Eileen as a marker. So basically, this comes from APA actually, but it's the same for Vancouver. So basically, a quotation less than 40 words or so can be placed within the text of your assignment. If you leave out any words, substitute with 3 dots. So it's and just make sure you put double quotes around the actual quote and then follow it with an in-text citation according to the style that you are using. And so she's, and then basically a much longer quote, so longer than 40 words, should be indented, and then should also, the font size should go down 1. Now, they don't like long quotes, and Eileen, when she co-taught this, was very clear. So so if you use quotes, try and keep them short and just keep quotes to a minimum. Just a note about Vancouver referencing. I do get asked this a bit from students and actually conveners. Vancouver referencing doesn't require page numbers. So you should, so it's optional basically, but if do quote something, then it is a good idea to put quotes. And the way that you do it is that you would put it after the number within the brackets like that. And I should also have added, and I'll just go back here, with APA, you only need to put page numbers in the in-text citation for a direct quote. If you're paraphrasing, or which is when you're putting somebody else's ideas or thoughts, whatever, in your own words, then you don't need to put a page number, but you do need to put an in-text citation. And what happens if there are no page numbers, which can happen with online resources? So in that case, you can use a paragraph number. So like this example here, paragraph 1, or you can use a section basically. And if that's the case, you put it within the bracket, but you put double quotes to indicate that's a title. I do get asked this quite a bit, because at postgraduate level, you may be sort of having conversations with people at work about your assignment, depending on what you're doing. And this is what's called personal communication. So it's like things like conversations, emails, phone calls you've had with somebody about what you're writing. So your reference list should consist of things that are tangible, things that the person marking your assignment can in theory go and look up and read themselves. Personal communication is obviously not tangible, but it does need to be cited. So it's cited in the text of your assignment, but not in your reference list. So this is the APA 7th. So you cite the person's name followed by, in brackets, personal communication, comma, followed by the date. And APA just has additional elements. So they usually suggest putting the sort of some extra detail, maybe the position, the department, organization, followed by the date. As I said, you don't, however, you just put it in the text of your assignment, but not in the reference list. Okay, and so this information was gathered by Eileen. So basically, it's common referencing issues that the conveners have identified, and it's mostly conveners in primary healthcare and general practice, but I think there might be some from the rehabilitation unit as well. So this person says referencing not tied to specific statements. So having lots of references at the end of a long sentence, or a paragraph with numerous statements and references all at the end. As the marker, I shouldn't have to guess which reference supports which statement. A way around this could be to keep sentences short. So what this person's referring to is, say, for example, this is just a paragraph here, and then I've got a whole list of references there. If they're marking that, they don't know which reference applies to which sentence. It actually looks like these references just apply to the last sentence. So best practice is to be as specific as possible when you're placing your in-text citation. So if say, for example, if in-text citation number 3 relates to the first sentence, that's where you should put the in-text citation. So be as specific as possible, rather than just leaving it to the having a whole lot of references at the very end. And the same thing applies to APA referencing. So you can see here, it's just about being really specific about where you actually got the information from, because you don't want to make it hard for the markers, because if I go back, as I said, it just looks like those references are citing that last sentence, and they don't know whether it's the last sentence, what's your thoughts, what's whether the first line comes from any of these sources. And this is this sort of follows on. It's about when you're using the same source throughout a particular paragraph. So basically, you do, again, the same thing. You can't just, you shouldn't just have the citation listed at the very end, because, again, it just looks like it's relates to that last sentence. And there's ways that you can flag to the person marking your assignment that you've actually used the same source throughout. So it's like using the word like state, they describe, they go on to say, they suggest. Those are words to use to indicate that this paragraph relates to that in-text citation. So you use those words and then you still use the in-text citation at the end. Same thing applies to Vancouver referencing. And again, this is about being specific in terms of the placement of in-text citations, because sometimes it may be that only part of a sentence relates to an in-text citation. So it's actually fine to put the in-text citation partway through a sentence if that's the case. So this convener, who I think came from travel medicine, probably by the look of it, says there's a grey area between what is considered common knowledge and what needs to be referenced. So she's got here an example is malaria is caused by infection with parasites of, I think that's Plasmodium genus. This is common knowledge and what would not need to be referenced. So common knowledge is basically knowledge that a lot of people within that particular area would know without having to look it up. I think there's actually a definition of common knowledge, which is that at least you would be easily be able to find it within 5 sources. Common knowledge differs according to the audience, because I wouldn't consider that to be common knowledge. But however, but once you start adding additional facts to common knowledge, then you need to find and cite it, basically. And this is her comment here. This is a specific fact and needs to be backed by a suitable reference. And this is about students are using someone else's interpretation of a study, not their own. And it's always best to access and critique primary data, the original study. If this is not possible, so yeah, this person says, be honest about the fact that you haven't cited the original study. This is actually called secondary citations or indirect citation. So it's so ideally, so an indirect citation or secondary source is where the ideas of one author are published in another author's text, but you have not read or accessed the original author's work. Ideally, and this is what the person was saying, you should try and access the original author's work. If that's not possible, then you need to indicate it. This is all about integrity. So the way that you do it with APA, you'd say Goldfish et al. 2020 as cited in Barrett and Pott 2023 found, but you would only in your reference list cite Barrett and Pott. You only cite the work that you've actually read. And this is the example for Vancouver. Barrett and Pott 1 cited the study by Goldfinch et al. The required referencing style is not used. Students only provide a reference list and no in-text citations. Sometimes students use a combination of APA and Vancouver. So you've got the in-text citation being APA, and then the reference list is organised in numerical order. So just be really conscious about sticking to the one referencing style. No, not proofreading the reference list. Citation management systems, which I think they mean referencing software, do not import all the correct information into the fields. So students need to check the reference list and see if the citations contain all the required details. And this is about citing websites and material from the web, and being really aware about the different styles for web-based materials. And again, it's checking the, if you're using referencing software, that citations have got the correct details, particularly if you're using Mendeley, because Mendeley often has a lot of mistakes in their references. So do check your reference list. Online only journal publications. So this person says no DOI URL are provided for online articles. So I talked about what the DOI was, and that's found usually on the front page of any article, and you can just copy and paste that into your reference. If a work has a DOI, include that in your reference. This is what this person says. If it doesn't, then you need to include a URL. This person's talked about broken or useless URLs. So some URLs take you to the UOW library login page. So this is an example just here. You can see this is 5 lines. So a URL should definitely not look like that. This, I think, happens when people are using Keshu or the library catalogue, and it will just depend. So sometimes you might be using what we call a sort of third-party platform, and that's when you get, you probably can't see this, but this is when you copy and paste the URL, that's way too long. If that happens, then probably the easiest thing to do is just Google the journal article and see if you can find the original journal website and use the URL from there. So I'm just going to check to see if there's any questions before I wrap up the session. So do we have any questions or comments in the? Oh, there's someone's just asked about the recordings. They're definitely going to be made available. I'll be sending them out basically early next week. So that's the recordings from the previous study skills sessions. So just to wrap up the session, so just in terms of preventing accidental plagiarism, which, as I said, it's accidental that most students do. So one thing I would really suggest is just keep track of sources when drafting assignments, because I think this is often when plagiarism happens. So what I've seen some students do, which I think is a really good practice. So basically, when you're drafting assignments, you're probably not going to be worrying too much about getting the in-text citation and the reference right at this point. But really what you're wanting to do is anytime you quote, paraphrase, or use anything when you're doing your drafting is just highlight it and use sort of like a place marker where you can actually just, sometimes when I'm doing this, I just put the surname just in brackets of the first author, and then in a separate Word document, I just copy and paste the article title with the surname, so I know where I got stuff from. So it's just being aware of doing that. Things that we can help with, so we can definitely help with how to reference specific items. We can do one-on-one consultations. So if you just want to go over referencing in general, we can do that via a Zoom or face-to-face if you're in Wellington. The general library email is library.uow@otago.ac.nz. Or if you find the Wellington Medical and Health Sciences Library, just Google Wellington Medical Library, and library contacts are just there, and you can just click on library contacts, and that's got our individual emails. So just to wrap up, referencing takes time and practice to get it right. It does get easier. You're probably not going to get it perfect to start with, but it's really important that you actually just give it a go. Make sure you have both an in-text citation and a corresponding reference in your referencing list, and use a referencing guide to help you. And as I said, just make sure when you're writing drafts that you keep track of when you're using other people's work. There's citation generators and referencing software like EndNote, Mendeley, or Zotero, but just be aware that none of these tools are perfect, so just check the references. Good luck, and just get in touch if you need any help. And I will be sending out the recordings of these study skills sessions probably early next week.